Amazon is no longer building the headquarters in New York. Yeah, I'm keeping the background. Amazon is no longer building the headquarters in New York. If you remember, after the election of Cuomo, it came out that New York was going to give away billions of dollars in subsidies and goodies, incentives, and tax breaks to get, and a helipad, if I'm not mistaken, to get their headquarters built in New York. I think Cuomo at one point said he'd change his name to Andrew Amazon or something like that, some weird thing. I am reflexively against this, of course. This idea of states and localities shaming themselves and this kind of race to the bottom and deciding what it can give this company that made $11 billion and paid zero in federal taxes. I am bothered by that just instinctively. That said, this is credited with, Ocasio Cortez and the activists that were on the ground pushing against this were credited with stopping this. And that's not just, thinking about it. Amazon said it directly. Take a look at this. In its statement announcing the plan's cancellation, Amazon was explicit that its decision was in response to the strong opposition from certain lawmakers. A number of state and local politicians have made it clear that they oppose the president's and will not work with us to build the type of relationships that are required to go forward, the company said. Now, this set off a firestorm of criticism of lefties, or liberals, not lefties, of liberals, liberal media, Democrat circles. Take a look at this. This is Morning Joe flipping out over the closure and essentially is making this argument that, he can't believe that this is taking place. But they've blamed Ocasio Cortez for this.
American capitalism. It is messy. It is difficult. But in this case, jobs create jobs. You can't just look at Amazon. It's the jobs that will be created out of that. You look at Washington, D.C., you look at the MCI Center when that went in, you look at what happened when the Nationals ballpark went in. It actually, the fabric of both of those neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. have changed, and most people would say will have changed for the better. And that's something that's not understood. It's just like the government shutdown. It wasn't just the 700,000 employees that were missing a paycheck. It was all the vendors. It was the cab drivers.
This is being cast in the light of an argument of jobs, that 25,000 jobs are going to be brought to New York, and that's the end-all, be-all. This was going to be jobs, and them stopping this was tantamount to the government shutdown. In another show, he blamed Ocasio Cortez. This entirety of this particular episode was not the entirety of the episode, but the entirety of this clip. This clip is like 20 minutes. Where they go into saying how insane this is, how crazy this is, I can't believe they did this, they're stopping us from doing so-and-so. Bill de Blasio comes on and makes his pitch about, and Bill de Blasio, supposedly a socialist, makes his pitch on why this is okay. I don't think this is okay. And just for me to explain why, and I'm going to let Richard Wolff also kind of make his point on why, but just to explain why. There's something shameful about this process. I mean, ultimately, it's one thing if states, a company that made $11 billion, extraordinarily profitable, decided that it wants to settle in a particular place. The issue here is not so much that the company couldn't settle in a place. The problem here was that it was giving all of these goodies to do so. Understand the precedent this sets, where localities, where all of these states, many of which are already hurting for cash in and of itself, decides that it's going to give away more goodies, more subsidies, give away more tax cuts that it needs. Yeah, I hope I'm making this point clear. It's one thing for the states to stand in solidarity. A company is going to make itself, particularly a company like Amazon, is going to put itself somewhere anyway. The idea that you're willing to give away all of these things for it to do so is somewhat problematic. Those resources could best be used in those state and localities themselves. My point here is, it's one thing to stand in solidarity and say, yeah, Amazon, you're welcome to any of these localities. You're just going to have to pay your fair share to be in those localities. As opposed to having Amazon parade itself around and show its hairy leg in one place after the next, asking, what are you going to give me to get this? Yeah, They might have bought a certain degree of jobs. There's no way to know if all of those jobs are going to be made by New Yorkers, particularly the good jobs, if they were going to be good jobs. And secondary to that point, that money could have been invested in order to grow those jobs naturally. I hope you understand what I mean by this. The money that was going to be given in tax breaks, subsidies, goodies, the helipad, New York is already hurting for cash. They have a public transportation system that's crumbling. That money could have been used in various other capacities to grow those jobs. It didn't have to be dumped into the hands of a billionaire. Amazon has the resources to build that plant or do whatever it needs to do in order to set up a second headquarters. And it has the resources to pay those people decent wages. I mean, for fuck's sake, it made $11 billion. It chooses not to do those things for fiscal interest. It wants to maximize its profit. I'm saying it shouldn't be maximizing its profit at our expense with corporate welfare. Again, $11 billion. No federal taxes. And in this case, they were going to get all of these goodies in order to incentivize them to come to their particular locality. Do we really want a system of a race to the bottom, where countries, where states, cities are willing to give things that they don't necessarily already have in order to subsidize jobs in a private sector, in a case where the company could have made the job itself? I would say that states, cities, localities should stand in solidarity and avoid this practice. They're going to set up a company anyway because they want to make profit in this particular place, meaning in the United States. Let them do that. They don't need our help in doing so. I would say, one, if there's any bar, meaning you can be a capitalist and look at this, and I'm talking about the 99%, just the regular person who's accepted this level of identity of the capitalist system itself, and then turn around and say, yes, we welcome the fact that Amazon wants to set up a company. Great. Let it set up its headquarters. But no, we should not be giving corporate welfare away. We should not be giving corporate welfare to do so. We should not have this race to the bottom where cities and localities are shaming themselves in order to get a company to do something that the company is going to do anyway. It's like, come on. I don't like this idea of doing this. If you have that, invest that money into your society and grow those things naturally. You don't have to dump money away like this. Don't take my word for it. This is Richard Wolff. I tried to get Richard Wolff on the show to have this conversation. He said he was busy. I'm hoping that he wasn't busy because of that the last show went long. But let's hear him talk about this. I don't want you to take my word for it. He's a Marxist economist. He can give a better explanation.
Or actually part of New York City, on the edges of New York City. $5.5 billion is the amount of money that the New York Times reports will be given. That's taxpayer money will be given to an already highly profitable company that has made its CEO the richest person on earth. By the way, $5.5 billion is an enormous amount of money. If it were split between these two cities, it could transform them. It could make the subways of New York, for example, beautiful and clean instead of their current condition, which is roughly the opposite. It could make Crystal City and Virginia able to provide all kinds of services, but that money is not going to be used for the subways of New York or for the services because it's being given to one of the richest companies in the world, and it's $5 billion, which, for example, if it were taken away from Mr. Bezos, would still leave him the richest person on earth, but would allow these two cities and states not to use taxpayer money for something other than providing services to the majority of the people in those jurisdictions. But I'm even more angry, if you like, about such a thing. Here's just a couple of dimensions for everyone to understand. First, the number of jobs that this is supposed to bring has been said to be 25,000 jobs. That's what the mayor of New York said would come to the New York area, and that's what apparently the company has also said. Well, I've been involved in these kinds of projects many times in my life. The politicians and the corporate leaders throw out whatever number they think will impress the public. Why? because there's no follow-up. No one ever knows how many jobs were created. Were they created of the type of jobs that were promised at the salaries that were promised?
And by the way, just to back up Richard Wolff's point, if Richard Wolff needs any backing up for his point at all, once it's done, it's done. Like, once this deal is done, the money, taxpayer, subsidies, all this other stuff, 2 or 3 years pass, well, the deal is done. How do you check up on it? How do you make sure that what they said this was going to be is actually, in fact, what it actually turned out to be? Richard Wolff's point is they're throwing out something that you would never go back in order to check. And even if you did go back to check, couldn't do anything about. Anyway, let's keep going. He's almost done. I'm going to make this one really quick because I don't want to get dinged for showing this footage.
In the time frame that was promised? The answer is nobody checks, nobody follows up, we'll never know. And if, in fact, we wanted to hold the company to doing what it promises to get that subsidy, well, then we would make conditions, wouldn't we? We would say, like when we hire a construction company, if you get the job done when you say you will, fine. But if it takes you an extra month, there'll be a penalty to pay. Why not say to Amazon, you create the job, 25,000 jobs at the salaries you've said, and you do it within 2 years, or we go back and collect the taxes you should have paid anyway, rather than give you a subsidy because you haven't delivered on your glowing promises. We didn't do that. We made no connection, we of the people of New York or the people of Virginia, no conditions of fulfilling anything. The $5.5 billion that will be given of taxpayers' money will generate many good profits for Amazon. The profits will be kept private for Amazon. But we, the people, are paying more than half the cost of this project. Socialization of the costs, privatization of the profit.
His point is clear, and God, I love his point. That's why I wanted Rich Wolff to come on the show to talk about this. If Amazon is going to do this, fair enough. If you're going to give them billions of dollars in subsidies and tax breaks, fair enough. But shouldn't we also get a return on that profit? Meaning, if we are paying for, and not me, but we, I'm saying the people, I don't necessarily live in New York, but if I did live in New York, if we indeed are given a subsidy, if we indeed are given these tax breaks and incentives and these goodies in order to get Amazon to come to New York, should we not also get a profit commensurate with the money that we've invested in the project? That just seems right. I don't quite understand why it's okay to give away this corporate welfare without necessarily getting anything in return for the corporate welfare. You could say jobs, that's nice, but, let's be honest, if we're putting in cash, kind of expect that back. Jobs is not enough in and of itself, especially when Bezos and Amazon is going to make billions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the factory in the first place. Richard Wolff is right. That said, Ocasio-Cortez, lefties for the most part, have been against this project. I've explained why, at least I hope I've kind of made the case as to why. That money could be invested in other ways, as opposed to just dumping it into a corporation. You don't even know that if you're going to get what they say they're going to give you, because after 2-3 years out, nobody's necessarily going to be paying attention. Cuomo is just going to get the headline. The company is going to get their headquarters with their tax breaks. And last but not least, that money, we get no return on that. That's money that's dumped into the company where there is no expectation in the state getting anything in return for the money that's been invested, other than quote-unquote jobs. But again, it's a $11 billion company in meaning of profits. They pay no federal tax. And in this case, states and localities are shaming themselves. This is a gross process. And this process needs to stop. States and localities need to stand arm in arm. Welcome them to your company or to your state if you must. Welcome them to your locality if you must. But they should pay their fair share, and they should be able to come there without getting tax breaks and incentives from the people themselves. It's corporate welfare, where the profits are essentially privatized, but all of the work and the resources put into it are socialized, needs to stop. It's one thing if it's something that we need and prioritize. We have a Green New Deal. We need some kind of thing to change the energy markets in the country. We need a radical process to push for this. I understand investment in this case. That makes sense to me. This is just gross corporate welfare. But that's me. And that's lefties. That's the perspective of the left when it comes to this particular type of thing. But there are some people who are running for president who don't take that perspective, who take a different tack to this.
I think,
and is perfectly willing to shame himself in order to get Bezos to look his way. That person is one Mr. Cory Booker. I've said Cory Booker would never be president of the United States. I've said that Cory Booker doesn't have a shot, a snowball's chance, in a hot hell of becoming president of the United States. I stand by that. It's stuff like this. I mean, at the end of the day, the lefties have taken a particular perspective that if Amazon wants to set up shop, great, but Amazon should pay its fair share, and it shouldn't necessarily need these tax breaks and incentives from us in a company that made $11 billion. Hey, use some of the money that you didn't pay in federal taxes to set up that plant. But Cory Booker doesn't take that perspective. Cory Booker comes out and makes this impassioned, shameful, humiliating plea for Bezos to look his way. Let's take a look at this.
I think every local community should be able to make their own decisions, and I applaud folks who want to deal with some of the issues that are really facing other neighborhoods and other cities, from gentrification, rising rent rates, indigenous communities moving out. In Newark, we have a local grassroots effort to try to bring Amazon there. We are a city that's built for a significantly larger population, has indigenous infrastructure, has incredible assets, the best transportation superstructure in the Northeast, incredible colleges and universities. Our local community leaders have decided that we would like to see Amazon come in the same way that I recruited Panasonic's North American headquarters to the city of Newark, in the same way that I helped recruit our country's sixth largest private company to come back to Newark. We are growing and booming as a city, but we're making sure we have a pathway for all Newarkers to prevent the ills that are often evident in gentrification and make sure that things work on our terms. So we want HQ2. We've sent that message out already, and everybody from the governor to the mayor to local leaders have been reaching out to Amazon.
All of these places shaming themselves for this corporation that is a multi-billion-dollar corporation had made money hand over fist and spades. Local democratic governments. It feels like the city and localities become diminutive in response to how big these companies are, and these guys are so willing to throw incentives and tax breaks, taxpayer money, at these things in order to grow a certain degree of jobs. When the pitches or the argument is made that, hey, why don't you just invest in the community itself in order to grow those jobs? Oh, that's too hard. That's too diffuse. How can I, you can't attach those jobs to my name in this kind of big splashy way if we're doing that. Cory Booker shaming himself for Amazon. Cory Booker would never be president of the United States. I'm just saying. All right. I am going to end this because I have a few other ones that I want to do before I finish for today. You already know I don't believe billionaires should exist, and I hate this thought or this notion of these states willing to shame themselves for companies in this way. Oh, and by the way, I should have showed the clip of Sanders. Sanders also kind of speaks and makes mention of this particular one. Billionaires are too involved in our political process. It is nice to see somebody pushing back, working to the benefit of the New Yorkers in this. And again, this kind of speaks of a shift in regards to a certain degree of political opinion. It's not across the board, but it is a flicker of something that seems to be organizing. So good on them. But let's be very clear. This doesn't hurt Amazon one iota. Just because one locality decided to push Amazon out, it would require a countrywide push to not do stuff like this. At the end of the day, Amazon is just going to set up shop somewhere else. Heck, maybe even in Cory Booker's territory. He was pretty, he was great on his knees trying to get them to come to to New York. But let me end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. I'll see you in a few minutes.